Welcome to another Hangout on Air by Federico Ree, entrepreneurship coach and founder of Creative Entrepreneur. Good morning, my name is Federico Ree from Creative Entrepreneur in Melbourne, Australia. And I'd like to welcome you to today's Hangout where we talk about the future of workspaces. And joining me today, I actually have a very, very special guest, which I'll introduce formally in just a few moments. And his name is Brad Krauskopf from in Melbourne, Australia. And today, just to go back to the theme or topic of today's Hangout, we explore really what does the future of workspace really look like if we look into the distant future. And I'm particularly keen to explore with Brad how does the future workspace affect productivity, health and well-being, and I guess the general spirit of a workplace environment. So without saying too much more, giving away too many secrets, I'd like to formally introduce Brad. How are you, Brad, today?
Good morning. Nice to see you, Federico.
It's a pleasure. And thank you for sparing your time to have a chat with me today. It's an absolute pleasure and an honour. So just to kickstart this, the chat, Brad, if you could give me a bit of an overview of who you are and what you do, and I guess what inspired you to become the founder of Third Spaces Group.
Sure thing. So I'm the CEO and founder of Third Spaces Group. About 5 years ago, we kicked off our business here in Australia by creating Hub Australia, which has grown to become Australia's largest co-working community. We work with small businesses across the country, and every day a few hundred small businesses come into Hub Australia across Melbourne, Sydney and Adelaide to work on growing their businesses. Now, our member tends to have between 1 and 10 people as part of their team, and we work closely to create connections and I guess a community that really fosters the growth of their business. As we've gone along on this journey, we've now also set up CoActivate, which is a consultancy that works with corporate and government to set up work hubs in suburban areas and in corporate towers. And last year, we also ran the first global co-working conference here in Australia. So we're big about how do we ultimately foster a new way to work here in Australia.
That's fantastic. And overall, how many years have these ventures been running for?
5.5 years now. So I'm just coming into year 6 and looking to see where we'll end up in year 10, actually.
Congratulations. Well, that's an achievement in itself. I'm sure you understand that as an entrepreneur. So I guess in a nutshell, how do those ventures, like even if we look at Hub Australia, how do they differ to conventional workspaces that are available even throughout Australia?
Sure. I guess the first thing is ultimately the intent. Whilst we might be in the business of space, what we really do in terms of the value that we provide to our members is helping them grow their business, is helping them build connections, helping them build networks and learning opportunities. We offer up our spaces here as a service. So rather than signing a lease, making lots of CapEx, and then ultimately entering into a really long agreement, we find that those long agreements and the huge CapEx is completely opposed to what the small business and indeed the large business of today actually needs, where things are moving really quickly. We can scale up, we can scale down. We go to the cloud and we flick a switch and we can double the amount of storage capacity we've got. You go to the landlord and you say, I want to flick a switch and double the capacity. It's like, okay, let's sign a lease, let's get security, and $1 million later and a year later we'll get your property. So at the Hub, you can take out a membership, and we provide workspaces as a service.
Great. And what type of people does it attract typically?
At the Hub, it's very much diverse small businesses. So we, by that I mean diverse ages, diverse industries. We really, we get a kick out of being able to service lots of different people doing different things. Very much, see that innovation happens in the edges. And, I love some of the the co-working spaces that focus on tech. I love the ones that focus on maker spaces and the maker community. We focus on the small business community and people that get their inspiration and innovation from working around diverse different people and businesses.
Great, and I'm sure you're attracting the aspiring entrepreneur as well, and they are the ones that seem to embrace this sort of innovation, and you mentioned even technology. So I guess if we turn our attention to those terms and if we go deeper into the subjects of innovation and even productivity, and the theme of today is about productivity and the innovation and the community per se within these hubs. What is your insight or perception on how these new age work environments actually stimulate productivity, I guess, and performance?
Yeah, sure thing. I guess, so because of anywhere working, when you make a choice to go somewhere to work, it's for a reason. What I think this has done is it's really ensured that companies, architects, designers, entrepreneurs, whoever it might be, we've raised the bar of what's expected from a workspace, because now we have to give people a really good reason to come to our workspace. Otherwise, somebody will just go somewhere else and work from there. So it's been really exciting. Google and Facebook are often well known for their workspaces. Co-working is particularly known for how it's given small businesses an opportunity to work in a more creative, innovative environment than the more traditional serviced office. So, we've seen workspace evolve where I see that its core function is actually to provide connections to learning opportunities, to business opportunities, and indeed social and health and wellness opportunities.
Right.
When we do we're often find ourselves in that 24/7 working environment. When it's 24/7 work that's demanded of you, you demand a lot more of work. So it's got to deal with your health and wellness. It's got to have an appreciation for providing social opportunities for you. People don't just go to work to get their work done anymore. We can do that anywhere.
That's a great perspective. I'm thinking about the work culture, and in a typical workplace environment, there is a culture, whether it's healthy, whether it's not. And there is a culture that's developed by the people that work for that particular company. So in this case, where it's a shared environment, how do you define, or is there such a thing as a work culture?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And, one of the things that I love about co-working, and indeed, whenever somebody comes to check out the hub, we very much encourage people to also check out a few of the other spaces, because they all have their own culture. And what you find is that it's the person picks the co-working space and indeed co-working community that best matches them. One of the things that we've found with co-working is that once companies get up to say about 10 and 15 people, that's when their culture, whether it's good or bad, as you pointed out, it's become strong enough that it's more difficult for us to absorb that culture in our larger hub culture. And that's where what we've often found in co-working, it really suits that 1 to 15, maybe 20 person business. But then what you find is that people, very important as a company grows, that it gets to grow its own culture. And at some point or another, that's where we see that there's a natural progression still, that a company will go and get its own space, because the space is just a container to help them grow their culture and their company.
And I would imagine that, given that there's such a diverse range of expertise and people from different companies, I don't necessarily feel that there would be a bad culture in that, because everyone's kind of collaborating together and almost comparing notes to see how well you're doing, because there's that energy, there's that entrepreneurial spirit. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's exciting. Like getting to work in, we're here at Hub Melbourne today, but the same could be at Hub Adelaide or Hub Sydney. Walking into the main room of Hub Melbourne, when it's just full of exciting entrepreneurs and team members of these growing small businesses, doing things, creating new products, creating new services, it's really exciting.
Yep.
What we know from a culture perspective as well is that it's never set and forget. We don't have different rules just because these aren't our companies. We employ full-time staff where it's their job to cultivate community, to set norms, to service the customers. And it's really interesting to see, even over the 5-year journey of Hub, our culture has evolved demonstrably. Like if you walked into Hub Melbourne 5 years ago and you walk into it now, the excitement's still there, but the culture has certainly developed like you see cultures develop in growing companies.
Fantastic and well done. If we turn our attention again back to innovation, I'm keen to also look at how innovation has evolved in the areas of architecture, furniture, lighting, and whether or not it's something that you've adopted in your own ventures, but also adding the industry within Australia. Also, I'm really keen to look at the Australian perspective and see what advances we've made in that space. So where do you see the innovation taking place at the moment in that area?
Yeah, sure thing. So Australia globally is actually highly regarded for its workspaces, especially around ABW, activity-based working, where companies essentially set up different spaces depending on the activity that's going to be happening in that particular space at that particular time, rather than just trying to say, right, there's our office and it's always going to work, and we'll make the activities fit. So in Australia, what I find particularly exciting is how we can start connecting vast distances and offices with the technology that's now available. One of the areas that we lack is certainly in the broadband infrastructure. Sometimes I do go to small businesses overseas, and they may have a 500 megabit or a gigabit connection in their office, and I'm like, that's my whole expense for my whole business back in Australia. So we still have a lot of challenges on the broadband infrastructure, but I know there are initiatives underway to address that. We're seeing a lot more focus on health and wellness come into the office. How do we implement furniture and indeed the overall design to encourage movement, to encourage better ergonomics. One of the ways that I think of the furniture and the design is that's the hardware. What a lot of people forget is the software. So you set up all the hardware, you set up these amazing offices that you walk into, and it's just, wow. But is it beautiful but empty? And what we find is that if you don't also concentrate on how you activate that space, how you program that space, so there are health and wellness opportunities, so there are social opportunities, and there is that culture of learning there, you've got to have both software and hardware, and it's an ongoing process that never finishes. Definitely not set and forget.
What a fantastic insight, Brad. When you talk about hardware and software, I'm thinking of the home versus the house. And, you can have an extraordinary looking house, but it does not have a soul because it's just a home. Yeah. I think it's important to not only have that physical, aspect, which you call the hardware, but also have the soul in there, which is really about the activities that go on and the people that actually form part of the environment. So that's a very good point. With all the innovations that take place and with technology constantly changing, obviously there comes issues and challenges and setbacks. What are some typical challenges that you experience or you would imagine that there still need to be overcome as we evolve?
Sure. Let's go back to your culture call before. One of the things that Australia has not lost is that culture of line of sight management. And indeed, I've been around other countries where I feel that they actually do that better. We need to grow a leadership capacity to coach and manage the needs of distributed workforces. Sometimes I think of like the MBA education that I went through, and in hindsight, it kind of like, it baffles me that, for instance, there wasn't a subject which was how do you lead, manage, support, coach a distributed team. You know, all of the leadership training that we have largely focuses on having everybody in the same room. And I think that as we go forward and we really harness the tech that's now available to us, this is not a matter of you know, more hardware or better fit outs. It's actually it's a human and a culture need is the thing that I think Australia needs to focus on mostly. And if we can develop leaders that can harness the power of distributed leadership and distributed workforces, rather than, you know, feel like they're running up against a brick wall because no one's in a room, that's where we're going to be able to really nail it.
When you talk about the issues that Australia typically faces, I think about the tall poppy syndrome, and I'm guessing that perhaps there is a bit of that goes on in this industry with regards to promoting and advancing those workspaces as compared to the traditional environment. So if I was an employer, a traditional employer, I'd be saying, no, you can't work at home, you need to work here in the office, because productivity perhaps is noticed, or there is that micromanagement that takes place. So if we look at traditional workplace environments and your type of environment, do you see a contrast, and do you see that the two can exist side by side long term, or is it more going in one particular direction?
Yeah, no, great question. So when I talk about remote work and I talk about co-working, the head office is absolutely still going to exist. You know, one is not going to suddenly transcend the other. It's just that the activities that go on at the head office are going to radically change. You know, there's still no better solution than getting everybody into the same room to aid innovation, to aid creativity, and to foster a learning environment. And for example, when I feel like we're going to the head office in the future, all it'll be is a classroom, and it'll be a kitchen cafe area, and it'll be a laboratory for innovation. You know, for instance, the cubicle farm where all the work gets done, that can be the kitchen table, that can be the library, that can be the cafe, that could be the train station, and hopefully the smart work hub in the suburban shopping centre, for example. So the office is still going to be there, but what it's used for is going to, I think, be very different, and much more high value activities where it's about having people working together.
It's quite fascinating when I think about the future. I often go to the movie, the Back to the Future, and you know, for some people, maybe for the old generation, it might be a little bit intimidating to look at 50 years ahead, and the way you're describing, you know, the future workspace can be quite challenging to grasp. Just before we go any further, Brad, I'd like to, just for the viewers, you know, highlight a few key pointers or gems that you've announced today. So I'm talking to Brad Krauskopf. He's the founder and CEO of Third Spaces Group. And today we talk about the future generation of workspaces. In particular, I'm keen to look at productivity, innovation, and community. Some of the key pointers that Brad has brought to my attention has been raising the bar, especially with regards to cultivating a community within that environment. There needs to be a culture that has to evolve. It's not just about hardware, but it's about software. And by that, it means it needs to have a soul that is pretty much run by the right people within that organization. There has to be a component of health and well-being. So it's not good enough just to have a fancy desk and a great light, but there also has to be other services that are offered that are complementary and perhaps holistic. And it is about leadership capacity. So those who are involved in these environments need to understand the needs of of the people that are there, and obviously the needs of people per se, for the overall well-being. So far, Brad, thank you for your thoughts and your opinions. Yeah, I'd like to perhaps sort of tie the knot shortly and sort of finish up on where you see Australia positioned in say 50 years time. I know that's sort of a big stretch. How do we compare today, and how should we compare in 50 years time with regards to the workspace in terms of, or comparing it to the developed nations out there like America and the UK that are certainly pioneering all this?
Yeah, sure thing. When we go out 50 years, often we think, let's go out 20 years, 50 years. So in 50 years, there won't be a single person in the workforce that ever knew a time where there was no Facebook or there was no smartphone, like ever, as in they would always have been there. And that's going to be the people that are in the main chunk of the workforce. When your whole life is one where you can build relationships online, where you build relationships globally without necessarily even having travelled that way, I think you actually think of the world in a plain different way. And whilst I'm a Gen X, I have a real need where the way I build up my trust relationships is through face-to-face meetings and interactions. Indeed, there are whole generations where that are being formed now and evolving, where the way they build those trust relationships can be done online and can be done through leverage and technologies in a way that I just can't wrap my head around. We'll still do business with people that we trust, but the way that those trust bonds can form now are completely different to, for instance, what I'm used to. I think one of the key developments which Australia can grasp onto, and indeed will need to, is that we'll also see a fourth space emerge where virtual reality will actually be the way that many of us go to work. So, for example, we talk about designing our buildings right now. Who is it to say that the architects of the future won't be app developers that will design the office as an app that I go to by putting on my VR headset in the morning? That kind of puts a picture there of, you're going to have the physical offices, you're going to have the home, you're going to have the smart work hubs and the cafes and the train stations as the third space. But then we also get to a fourth space where we're actually in a virtual office. And I think that's going to be an interesting one, where then you're really leveling the playing field. Now that's a global economy where we can create virtual offices where it's not about the developed world, the developing world. It's about a space with a very level playing field. If you've got a very level playing field, you want to be a damn good business that can compete globally with anyone.
Wow, I'm totally gobsmacked by your comments, and certainly I find your vision very exhilarating, and I look forward to seeing that take place as time goes on. Brad, I'd like to perhaps finish up by saying a big thank you to you as a game changer and as an entrepreneur who's pioneering the industry and making the necessary changes to suit society or community as a whole, and to essentially make the workplace environment a more homely experience, but also one that's more dynamic and driven by the passion of other entrepreneurs within that workspace environment. So without saying anything more, and I know that you've got a busy schedule today, a big thank you, Brad, and I really look forward to observing your progress in the years to come with regards to this industry. So thank you.
No, thank you, and thanks for giving us a platform to share our ideas. Thank you all to anybody who's listening. Appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. Well, take care. Thank you again. Bye-bye. For more of Federico's Hangouts on Air, please visit www.creativeentrepreneur.com.au.